Hello and welcome. What does it take to be a woman in India today? The challenges, the battles, and of course, the victories. Today, among other things, we look at all those women who are silently breaking barriers, turning into catalysts for transformation. But why do they remain off the headlines? And also in election season, why aren't they considered this very powerful vote bank that they ought to be? All that and lots more coming up over the next half hour. Joining us a special panel, we have Shabana Azmi, Kavita Krishnan, Karuna Nandi and Sudhir Mishra. Thanks all so much for being with us on the program. Shabana ma'am, first to you. It's almost become a cliche to say, how India is a country of contradictions. We celebrate women in some of the most powerful institutions. They head just so many establishments, yet we don't think twice before we kill our baby girls. Do you believe that one problem is also that we've got used to being a country of these contradictions, that this is how we are, and we've sort of unfortunately made our peace with this situation?
I think that's a very important question, because one constantly says that India is a country that lives in several centuries simultaneously, and its people encapsulate all the contradictions of the great society that it is. But the fact is that, are we looking at the situation as a glass half full or half empty? And I do think the glass is half full at the moment, because a lot of change is taking place. All over the world, it has been recognized that it is not merely the GDP of a country and a society that constitutes its progress, but the Human Development Index, of which empowerment of women is a very important yardstick. And so certainly you do see more and more that women are being placed at the center of development, not to the extent that we want them to, but there certainly has been a change in the last decade or so.
Right. So, Kavita, so much has changed in the last few years. We're talking about, gender a lot more. There's just so much talk and also a fair amount of action, many would say. But cynics would say, what really has changed? When you look at the stats on crimes against women, despite so many of us being so vocal about it and it's sort of being back on the front burner, they would argue that what really has changed on the ground. Is that too negative an approach, you think?
No, I don't view change in terms of statistics and all of that. I think it's important that we have started talking about forms of violence, recognizing forms of violence beyond just certain particularly horrific rapes. But we are recognizing a whole range of forms of discrimination and violence. But I think that the thing is that the struggles on the ground, it's as though you're struggling for small inches. And there are many points at which even the small inches that you gain are again taken away. So I think that while there is a positive change, there's also clearly there are attempts to organize a backlash against that change. There's a lot of hostility to that change from the political establishment, from governments. It's almost as though they're willing to think in terms of certain kinds of schemes and so on. But in terms of the very idea of women's freedom and women's autonomy, there's a whole lot of, a great deal of reluctance, both in the political language as well as in the political policies of governments, to actually look at and nurture that will for autonomy, that assertion for autonomy that we're seeing.
The interesting point is it's not just men really who sort of, as a couple of years ago we were told that, are reluctant to allow women that space. It's also mindset which concerns a lot of us women. For example, we've heard, heads of women's panels and commissions just the other day talk about why was that rape survivor there when the incident happened? What was she doing out there? So we're going round and round in circles. Why was she dressed the way she was? Why was she out at night? Why was she drinking? Round and round. So obviously, it's a mindset issue. It's a perception battle, which is, of course, going to be the big one to win or overcome.
See, we are basically a patriarchal society, and also many of our women are invested in that patriarchal mindset and look at themselves by the lens of the patriarchal mindset. Even within that, I definitely feel that today democracy is a woman that has lost her fear. And for the first time you see a discourse, central discourse, saying that in the case of rape, shift the blame and shift the shame. So it's no longer about the woman being in a seemingly provocative situation because of which she invites rape, which has been the mindset till December 16th, I would imagine. And it continues to pervade even now. But the fact is, women themselves are no longer thinking. It was very significant for me that when a member of parliament said, after the girl has been raped, even if she lives, she will be a zinda lash. And there were so many young girls who got up and said, how dare she use language like that? Zinda lash, wo kyun banegi? Zinda lash to wo aadmi banega jisne uske saath ye kiya hai. Now to me, that is an extremely important mindset that has taken place, which is not to say that with regularity we don't hear of Dalit women being raped mercilessly every single day and all of that. But I would still think that there is a movement forward. I agree totally with Kavita that every time the women's movement seems to take one step forward, there is an attempt to push them back into what are the comfortable spaces of a patriarchal society. So it's really a kind of surrogate freedom that a patriarchal society wants to offer. Basically, to treat you like a Devi and say, we treat you like a Devi and we worship you. That is a way of saying, all right, we'll put you up on a pedestal, but we will give you no equal rights whatsoever.
True.
So we have to turn on and say, we don't want to be treated as Devis, we want to be treated as equals.
Right. There's of course that and the Ma, Behan, Beti stereotype. You're either that or there are questions going to be raised on what you're doing, why are you there, why are you dressed the way that you are. Do you feel that there is beginnings of change, sort of?
I think a lot has begun, actually, Natasha. First time we saw in Delhi that a government then came to power and all three parties were talking about violence against women, were talking about women's issues in general and attempting at the very least. Exactly. Of course, there was a lot of the protectionist mindset. You know, we had the BJP saying, betiyon ko suraksha denge, etc. But there was an attempt to address the issue and there was an attempt to gather votes. Now, in terms of the policy, that I think is now fundamental.
I see.
You know?
Okay.
Which is that the Delhi government has been talking about women's security forces, but they did sign on to a women's election manifesto that we were all a part of. And now I think the thing is to implement that idea of women's freedom into very concrete plans. And they have signed up to it, and now we need to see implementation.
Right.
So even with the Banerjee
So
government, for instance,
they've also landed up in some trouble and on how they look at women, treating women.
It's a big problem.
Right.
And I think those things need to be made clear, you know. Like on the one hand, I think to expel somebody like Somnath Bharti, but on the other hand also not to do something that is just tokenistic.
Right.
To make sure that those integral things are done.
That in fact, Kapita, was going to be my next question. How does one tell whether it's just words, tokenism as, you know, as we are hearing, or is there genuine concern or genuine will to do more on the ground? Because it's very difficult to tell in this day and age, because you say one thing and then you come to power. And you're doing something entirely different.
My concern is that it's not just about doing something, but also what they are doing exactly. So I think the things that we in the women's movement have been expecting from governments, because these are things that only governments can do at the end of the day. These are not things that should be left to charity and to some funding and this and that. This should be the state's responsibility to ensure that you have, you know, from simple things like street lights, of course, but going up till public transport that is safe and accessible, going up to safe shelters for women, going up to rape crisis centers that actually function and provide medical and legal and other forms of aid, ensuring accountability for the police, having education, public education. I don't mean only in schools, but actually an active public education system that actually educates not just about how you shouldn't rape and how you should respect women, which is saying nothing, but actually educates about how you need to fight patriarchal ideas and learn to respect women's freedom and autonomy. Most important thing last year was the shift in paradigm from suraksha, protection, to the question of azadi, freedom and autonomy. And that shift I'm yet to see reflected in government policies and government concerns.
Right. So, you know, along with this great shift that we're talking about, it's also the simple, the simple notion, respect women. There are so many people out there who are saying, why is it so difficult for us as a society to just respect women, to give women the respect that they deserve, just as a man does, treat us equally? How do you believe, how do you see this discourse?
You know, I think the genie is out of the bottle, and women will claim their rights now, and aspirations have been triggered. what has happened in the past 2-3 years is really significant. What is happening is that you will see, I think, increasing violence and a kind of by subterfuge things happening against women, because the male patriarchal system is now forever threatened.
Right.
You know, so I mean, if a girl in Haryana now living in a village has an aspiration to become a sports person, and when she expresses that aspiration, there will be a backlash against her. I can see this backlash happening amongst males, and the responsibility of all of us, even in the media and everywhere, is now, I mean, increasingly important. Whenever the women are, you know, when this conversation happens, and then you go into this moral idea of how a woman should be, and that is the most dangerous, in which political parties really have to watch out for, you know,
Right.
because I mean,
Again,
we all
those
have to
boundaries
learn
imposed
now
by
how
men,
to
right.
speak. You know, you have to relearn how you speak. You know,
Right.
I mean, in public positions, in power, because
Right.
you know, this is happening all the places.
Right.
You know,
Shabana, you
everywhere.
had a point to make. Go ahead.
Yes, I totally agree with Sudhir, and that's the point we have to make, that the nature of women is not her weakness, but her strength. And the nature of women makes her a nurturing person, makes her want peace, makes her want to look at the world with a different lens from that of men. I think the confusion must end, that when we say we want equality, we are not asking for sameness. We are saying equality but not same, equality but different.
That's going to be our biggest challenge and battle. Yes, Karuna, go ahead.
I think the problem, Natasha, is male supremacy, right? I don't think women are necessarily, this idea that women are all nurturing or that women are all different from men in this way. I think these boxes are
Or
a
that
problem,
men can't nurture.
right? I think there's a way in which our boys, and I'd love to hear from some of you, you know, are raised to suppress some of the sort of nurturing, softer sides of themselves. And the girls are raised to suppress some of the more, you know...
Because you're a man, be a man. Go
Be a
behave like a
man.
man. Be a man. That's
you know,
the
there's
kind
pressure
of
on boys to
popular
play
discourse.
football and to put away your
Yeah,
dolls. And,
yeah.
you know, and if you're a girl, there's this pressure to not be too masculine.